Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being out here. I know a lot of us on the late night. I will say you. I'm Pamela Bloom for Fujifilm, and I want to introduce Fernando Villanova. Did I say that right? I always want to say Villanova because my husband's Villanova, so I'm always really like it's easy to remember. Fernando is very passionate about crafting stories in the most beautiful and engaging way possible, and you'll see that in some of his work up here. Over the past 13 years, he has been filming commercials and branding content for the biggest brands in Central America. He believes good stories give the opportunity to move people, to influence opinions, and to impact lives. And I've seen that firsthand. He's constantly looking for new challenges and new ways of working with elements of a story to create unique looks. And above all, he wants to collaborate with people who appreciate the power of creativity and want their work to be impactful. So let's give it up for Fernando.
Thank you, Pamela. That was profound. I want to start out making it a little more personal and bringing you back to the moment where I started with this idea of cinematography. And the idea was that I include here a picture of when I was 15 and I asked for my very first film camera. But I was going through my old photos and I found this collage that I made earlier when I was 10 years old. And it was a pleasant surprise because I read the caption and noticed that I had justified the fact that I chose this image because I really liked Apollo 13. I'm pretty sure that at the time I was more thinking about being an astronaut than being a cinematographer. But now that I look back on this image, I smile on the fact that from a very, very early age, it seems like I was already looking out for nice images in film. So it's nice to connect the dots looking down. As I said, it started when I was 15, and I asked my parents for a camera as my birthday gift. And I always go back to this moment because the moment that I picked that camera up and went out to shoot my first roll of film, and these are the actual negatives of that moment, I remember the experience and the way that I was able to communicate and express feelings in other ways that I hadn't been able to do so before. And being able to freeze time and to play with light and to show shadows and lights and play with contrast gave me this feeling of just being able to connect with people in other ways that I couldn't before. Words haven't been my strength, neither spoken or written. So, opening my world to photography was really great. And then a few years after that, I was able to come to New York, convinced by a friend that's actually here in the audience, and gave me a good piece of advice. And New York sort of became my stomping ground. I had no formal training in photography, and being out of the streets of New York gave me the opportunity to become familiar with using a camera, and with the settings. But most importantly, to understand what I was looking for. And this is relevant because today's talk is about being intentional as a cinematographer. Many times we go to workshops and we go to conferences and we always focus on what we're doing, but not necessarily why we're doing. So before I dive in, I'd like to share a little bit of my work. Over the past, as Pamela said, 13, 14 years, I've been working as a commercial DP primarily, but also do quite a bit of documentary work. So I'm going to show you a little bit of my commercial work first. And as much as I enjoy my commercial work, the one thing that really gives me creative fulfillment is the documentary work. Because in the commercial space, everything's very curated. There's a lot of resources that are thrown into making these images. There's a lot of control. But then when we're out making documentaries and making things that are a little more spontaneous and less controlled, I think it requires a little more creativity and more talent. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And when I think about cinematography, there's always three things that come to mind. The first one's the what, and it's, we're going back to the original definition of it. We're painting with light, creating images, right? And then there's the how, and that's very simple, especially now with all the digital technology, working with these cameras, amazing piece of equipment, especially with all the recent developments from big to small, creating good images with these tools. And what's important to me today is to think about the why. And I think that this one's the more complex. And it's the one that helps us set us apart in terms of who we are as artists, as cinematographers. And that leads me to think about the intention. And it's the one question, the one word that's always in my mind when I'm creating images. The dictionary definition of intention is a determination to act some way. And I'd like to add to that, as an artist, that it's important that we align our values to our goals from the short term to the long term. In the short term, it's about the projects that we have in front of us. What I'm filming tomorrow, next week, the next production. And then the long term is who I want to be as an artist and the legacy that I want to leave behind. And I think that we all have access to the same tools and the same technology. And it's important that in our intention, we all not only think about the style and the images we're creating, but also about what the message is that we're trying to communicate. And that relates to the story. It helps us make conscious decisions when we're intentional. When we're on set and we know the story and we know our style, we make better decisions. And I'd like to divide this talk into three big segments. And the first one is a little bit about discovering your own style, because it took me a while to understand this, and it has to be a very conscious exercise, and you have to be very present in order to make this happen. And the way you do this is you put yourself out there in the world, and you start thinking about what it is that makes you unique. And you have to be very present, and you have to really question the way that you see things. And to me, the exercise has been to go through the different things that I see when I'm out there. Is it the light? Is it the people? Is it the landscape? Is it the architecture? Many times it's the detail of things. I found that over time, there are patterns that we develop as artists, and there are likes and dislikes that we have, and we must be very familiar and very connected to that. And so I've put up some examples of the work that I've been creating when I'm working with people. As I look back on the films that I've been creating, I find that setting up wide shots with the people in the center of them is something that I always go back to. And the reason why that is because the people are the center of the story, but it's also important for the audience to understand the context, right? So when you create these sorts of framing in a single image, you're able to very quickly communicate to the audience, to the people watching these films, what's going on. I also find that I'm always drawn to texture. I'm always looking for the little things, I'm maybe sometimes the crazy guy that's filming the leaves of grass, or the texture on the stones. And with the editor that I work with a lot, we'd call this, visual garbage, because at the time it feels like it's not meaningful at all. But then when you're editing and you're finding all these shots, they create a sense of place and a sense of story, and they become fillers inside of the story, and sometimes transitions, and many other times even a point of contact for the audience to understand the story better. The other thing that I've found in my work a lot is that I'm a big fan of light and the way that light plays into the stories, many times creating different colors, other times subtracting colors and creating silhouettes, and sometimes even creating sense of emotion or adding some sort of feeling to the character that's in the frame. So it's very important that we develop this sense of style and that we connect with it, because when we find ourselves in situations where we have to act quickly, we have a cheat sheet with which we can make these decisions. And this is an example of a recent shoot that I did in Chile with Santiago, who's a fellow cinematographer, who's retelling the behind the scenes story of his documentary, which is about mingas, a tradition in Chile where they move houses across the water from one town to the next. And when we're almost finished, when Santiago all of a sudden decides to run and get in the water, I wasn't prepared to film this, and of course I wasn't getting in the water. He decided to get on his underwear and get in the water, and I was like, how do I get a meaningful shot of Santiago and make the best out of this opportunity? So I went under the house and framed this up. And it kind of summarizes the story, because we see Santiago in the center of the frame, surrounded by the water, which is crucial to the story. And then we see the stilts, which connect us to the houses, which are the central character of the story. And the only way that you can achieve this is by having that cheat sheet where you can make decisions almost automatically, but intentionally. Similar situation here. This was earlier during the year. We went out to Kenya to shoot a behind the scenes documentary with Bob Poole and his friend Tom. Guys got out of the car, wanted to get a shot of the landscape, and got on, climbed up on the tree. They're very good at that. They've been going to Kenya for quite a while. I'm not. On the ground trying to get a shot of them and frame this up. And the reason why I like this is because you have the tree branches that connect to the center of the frame, form a V and frame them up. They're at the center of the frame. You can see the relationship between the two characters. Bob is the master cinematographer. Tom is the mentee. And also you get a sense of place because you see these branches in the background, which are very particular to Africa and Kenya. So in a single shot, you're able to tell a story of sense and place. And so hopefully what happens with time is that you're able to develop a unique style that is a fingerprint that you see in all of your work, right? And you're able to create these mood boards and collages with these images that represent you as an artist and that you feel good about. Famous Roger Deakins quote here says that it's the most important thing is the image that you have in your head and not the technique. And I think that I must emphasize on that because nowadays we all have access to almost anything in terms of technology and tools, whether it's renting or buying, small or big. But what makes the difference, what will set you apart as an artist is what's in here, not what is outside and what you can have access to that everybody else has. And then the second part about being intentional, like I said before, is connecting your style to the story, right? So first, you know who you are as an artist, and then you try to think how you can bring value to the story that you're a part of. And it's very important to understand that as cinematographers, we become part of a team. And this is a shot from a film we shot in 2022 for Fujifilm. We were documenting the work of Rinty Ruiz, who was a street photographer. And before going into this job, what I did is I really studied his body of work. And I wanted our film to reflect his street photography. And this happened again very quickly, documentary work. He got out of the car and we were on the third floor of a garage building. And he started looking down because it was early during the day. There was this nice light pattern that was shining on the street, and he was trying to get an image of a person walking through a pool of light. And I walked away because I figured I wasn't going to get in the way of his work. And all of a sudden I found an image that was very well connected to the work that he was trying to create. So the entire documentary turned into this, trying to find frames that spoke to Vince's work. But it was only possible because I had been very intentional from the very beginning. And so intentionality is not just about the moment that you're on set filming. It starts from the moment that you learn that you're going to be part of the story. So it goes from pre-production to post. Many times it starts even when you're at the very beginning, thinking about the ideas. And especially in commercials, we get the chance to storyboard and we get to draw these stories out. But when it comes to documentary, the situations that we jump into many times are unknowns and we're not able to storyboard. So one thing that I do on a daily basis, and I highly recommend that if you're in this, the craft of cinematography or filmmaking, is that you create a visual journal. And I do this in many ways. I do this on video. I'm constantly on video, spending 1 hour, 2 hours a day, just watching other films. And then things that I like and that speak to me, I put into channels and I classify them according to the topic, to why they are important or they catch my attention. I also do this on Instagram, with bookmarks. And then I use other tools like mood boards. There's a very cool website called Save It, where you can create mood boards, and these mood boards can be shared with your team so that when you're ready to go into production, you already have some sort of visual reference or style that you can work with. And I also do a simple notes file on my phone when I'm watching TV and all of a sudden I see a commercial come up that I like, or I'm at the theater and I see a film that I want to remember. I'll jot it down on my phone so I don't forget. And it's not only digital. Many times, when I get the opportunity to travel, I'm based in Salvador, but when I come to big cities, New York, sometimes in Europe, I try to go to museums and see, classic photographers, classic painters, and also keep a visual journal of that, because when the job comes, it's easier to pull them up. And this is an example of what I do with those references. I create mood boards. This is an example of a shoot we were doing in the Olympic Valley of California in 2021. Never been there before. This was an endurance race. Everything was going to happen very quickly. We had no idea what we were going to be able to capture. But hey, why not have a reference that I can work off so that I can share with everybody else, and it can be a way for me to know that I can represent the idea, the image that's in my head, but also make sure that the entire story feels cohesive image-wise, right? So these are the references, and then these are the images that we captured. So it's not a copy-paste. I'm not looking to replicate the work of someone else. I'm looking to have a reference to make sure that when I find myself in a situation where there's a sunrise or a sunset and there's a silhouette, I know the type of image that I want to find, and also to make sure that by the end of the shoot, I have enough shots to tell the full story. Similar situation here. Like I said before, we were shooting in Kenya earlier this year. Never been there before. Never been to the savannah. Don't know the opportunities that we're going to get. We've been told you can't get out of the car. You can only shoot from inside. So I start looking for references, right? People that have done this before, because I'm not the only one. And I create a mood board that I can share with the team. And we're there with, 3 other people, all of us trying to capture footage so we could tell the story between the 4 camera angles, and then ended up with this. So similarities, but again, not a copy paste, right? Just trying to anticipate and have a vision of a situation so that every time that I pull my camera out, it feels intentional and it has a purpose, instead of trying to document or record everything and then trying to find the story in post-production, which is definitely not the best thing to do. And then there's many times where we don't have a time to plan, or we find something unexpected. This is a shot from my phone. This was in Chile when I was working with Santiago, who you saw earlier. And this is the Airbnb where Santiago was staying. And I was coming in and out of his, bedroom because we had meetings there. And every time that I walked past this hallway, I was like, there's something here. There's something here. There's something here. And eventually I got the opportunity to turn that into a frame in the film, right? And this was super spontaneous. It was coming out. We were going to jump into the car, but I knew that I wanted to film that hallway. So I had my camera ready on the road in, and Santiago was exiting the room and I'm just tracking him down. And the reason why I like this shot so much is because it shows a way that with very little you can achieve beautiful shots if you are intentional, right? There was a piece of architecture that I really wanted to film. I knew that the lighting was right. I knew that this was relevant because we were filming houses. The architecture of a house was relevant. Santiago was in the center of the frame. He's the central character. And by coincidence, he was like dressed in nice colors that contrast with the wooden colors of the house. So, happy accidents do happen. Same thing here, same shoot. We actually got a day to scout, sunset. And then the next day I was really crossing my fingers that it would work. Nobody knew if we were going to get a cloudy sunset. And we got these very dramatic images of the moment that they were going to move the house out into the water. Back to my friend Roger Deakins, Sicario, the silhouettes against the sky. It's, you need to have these visual keys inside of your head so that when the moment arises, you have some references to pull from. Similar situation here, walking into houses with very dramatic lighting, no previous scouting, just making sure that I can use the elements that I've seen before and the things that matter to me to create these images. And then the last thing that I want to focus on is that when you're creating stories, especially documentaries, it's important to remember to be human, right? Because we are artists. We want to tell our own story, but there's many things that are already there that we need to understand. And many times we don't have enough time to meet these people to fully understand their background or their story. So what I do is before I pull my camera out, I try to develop a relationship with the characters and the people. Sometimes it's even with the camera itself. In this case, we were in Peru, and the kids and the ladies were super curious about the camera. So it's an icebreaker to start a conversation, to start developing a relationship, to make sure that you can get close and that they feel comfortable with you, capturing their images, especially with people from specific cultures where, capturing an image or taking an image has a profound meaning to them, right? So, you have to remember that remaining human in these situations is definitely important to the level and the intentionality of your work. And other times also part of being human is, I know I've said you have to develop a cheat sheet, you need to have a system, is questioning that system, right? Because once you're in it, you can run into the risk of doing it too much. So questioning the angles and seeing things from different perspectives. Many times, you gotta find framings that kind of don't make sense, but then in the end it makes sense. Here we was shooting with Rodrigo and Argentino, and he was framing up a shot. He's a photographer framing up a shot, and there was this abandoned house. And I went inside. There wasn't anything in there, but it gave me the opportunity to frame up Rodrigo in the moment that he was talking about framing. Out of coincidence, nothing's planned, but trying to think differently, right? Trying to find an angle that is unexpected instead of being in front of him or behind him. Just, this small snip between the wood pieces inside of the abandoned house. And same here, with Alejandra in Mexico. Just, the fact of not framing the bottom part of her and having her contrast against the sky gives you a feeling very different than trying to include. She was standing on a dock next to the water here. So just thinking about framing when you're going through these situations. And then part of being a cinematographer, and the reason that most of us are here, of course, is because of gear, right? And there's this misconception that we always need to have the best gear or the bigger gear in order to capture nice images or successful images. And I'd like to challenge that, because many times, if you are intentional and you know what you're trying to capture, the best camera is not necessarily the biggest or the most well-known camera, right? I travel a lot with these Fujifilm cameras, hybrid cameras that maybe are not the first option for many in terms of film work or documentary work. But I can speak to the fact that having these hybrid cameras that are smaller and nimble give you the opportunity to get into these situations that are super unexpected. The music playing is from the video. and that people will feel less intimidated by it, right? So I think that the gear is definitely part of what we do, but you can be very creative with working with different types of gear if you already have an intention in mind. These are the kinds of images that you can create with whatever camera you have in front of you. These come from the Fujifilm X-H2S. The ability to move quickly and to react to the situations give you the opportunity to create an image like this. We were with Sharon in Peru, walking around this lake, had not done any scouting before, and I was walking behind her. She went to the edge of the lake. I was trying to find a shot, and then I just stepped back a little bit and immediately noticed this reflection of the mountains and how she had perfectly stepped in the middle, right? And all I had to do was a little bit of a tiptoe to get the camera a little higher up so that she wouldn't cross that horizon line and create this beautiful reflection image. But I feel like the only reason why I was able to create this is because I was acting fast with a small camera, moving around quickly. And then after we've gone through the entire production, the one thing that I most emphasize is that we must follow the process to the very end. Especially now in the digital age, we feel like once we've captured the image, that's where it finishes, right? And we forget that, like Ansel Adams once said, there's a process that goes from the camera to the negative to the print. And the print nowadays, many people forget about it. In cinematography, in filmmaking, the print refers to what we do to the image once we've captured it. Yes, we can stick a lot onto it or do a Rec 709 and deliver it, but that's not really intentional, right? Once we capture the image, there's a lot that we can do with it, especially if we're using cameras that allow flexibility, that give us the dynamic range, that have that information there for us to manipulate that image. And here are some examples of the way that we work with that. You know, we start with these raw images, and then we do a first pass just to develop the image, but then we do additional color correction to make sure that we're bringing the level of contrast that we want, that we have the level of drama that we want in the image, that we bring in the colors of the sky, that we create the contrast and we bring out the details to make sure that our eyes are going to the places that we want to, right? As an audience, when I'm creating these images, I'm thinking, where are you looking at? And if I don't go and edit these images in the correct way and do the color grading, then maybe I'm missing a little bit of the process and a little bit of the value of the image creation that I made earlier, right? So in this example, you saw the raw footage of this. It's lacking contrast, but then once we bring it in, your eye immediately goes to her face. And the reason why this happens is because we're not only adding color, you know, we're creating contrast with vignettes, making sure that we are focusing on her, that there's contrast between the color in her face and the color on the door. And that's the work in post, and the work during production was making sure that I was choosing a spot where I could photograph her in a way that those elements could then be used in post-production. Similar here, you know, the log version of the image and then the primary correction. And then once you bring that color palette in so that it ties in with the rest of the story and the type of image that I want to create. In this case, you know, the color grading that we're going for is trying to emulate some of the Fujifilm stock that was created in the past and creating that unique Fujifilm look that can be achieved in camera, but can also be worked in post with a little bit more of intention. So before I leave, I'd like to share a little bit of this, of these images now with a little bit of movement as a short reel. And I hope that you've enjoyed and that I've left you with a message about being intentional. Thank you. So it's building brick upon brick, right? From the moment you start in pre-production, but also the moment that you start working as an artist, thinking about the intention today, what I want to tell in my story, I want that frame to say, but also what I want my career to look like, 10, 12, 13, 14, 30, 40, 50 years after I started, right? Intentionality starts today. It starts at the moment that you step on set and you take that camera out, and it has to be a process. And I think that it's definitely the one unique factor that lets you stand out and set yourself apart from the rest of the creators. I think we have a few minutes. Do you guys have any questions? I was actually just curious where you were in Chile. Because from Chile, I remember in Chile where they have a lot of the house on states and all that. So just, I was curious about that. Chile, you got it right. Yes, yeah. That's great. Listen, I understand it wasn't Chile, yes. That was an easy question. Anybody have a hard question?
At the end of your compilation there, we had it, and then just floating on the shore, the way it's coming in, how much do we slow that down, learning to intentionally show that when providing that and stuff like in the way and it's just very slow.
Yeah, so that was shot at 120 frames per second. So, it's like 5 times slower than normal. And yes, it's like you said, it's an intentional decision, right? Usually the movement of water, the flow of water is rather quickly. And when you put it into slow motion, it becomes almost therapeutical, right? In the way that you see these waves and it creates a rhythm as well. So this is a real edited to a different music, but then one of the other things that I definitely do, so I direct and DP. One of the things that I do is we create original sound design to every one of our stories, right? So these visual rhythms link very well with the sound rhythms as well, the sound design.
If a sudden unexpected moment strikes, or maybe the predictions aren't optimal, would you rather take a moment to start grabbing a lens footage, etc., or develop this type of shot? I will have great talent buds, can have issues, and I need to have a shot as fast as I can, or would you rather take a time and right footage through it? That's like
That's a good question. That's a hard one. I think that it really depends on how fleeting that moment is, right? Because you're only gonna get it once, then I'd rather have it in the camera than try and make it perfect. But if I know that it's gonna repeat itself, right? Maybe it's somebody doing something that they're gonna repeat various times. I'm gonna try to get it once, and then I'm gonna try to make it better the second time. But if it's only gonna happen once, I'd rather have it in the camera and see how I can work it into the story afterwards than regretting once I'm in the edit bay and thinking back on, oh my God, this beautiful shot, but I didn't get it because I didn't have the proper tools to make it look perfect.
Yeah, so when you're doing this run and gun stuff, if you ever miss the subject, do you ever have to limit it again to see if you get it?
Sometimes. It depends on the relationship, right? Many times on these shoots, for example, when we're working with the photographers and the cinematographers, we've been on the shoot for 3-4 days. And then by that time, we also already have a good relationship and you can ask them to repeat certain things. But then other times when it's people that you don't have a trusting relationship with, you just have to accept the fact that you missed a moment and you're not going to get it again. But I think that in documentary work, if it feels intentional, then it's okay to ask people to do stuff, right? Maybe you miss something, or maybe on day one, you notice that they do something as a part of the process or part of the ritual or part of their culture. And on day 2, they didn't do it, but you feel like it would be a nice part of the film. Then I think it's okay to go and ask, hey, you know what? I noticed that you were doing this yesterday. You think we can repeat that today so that I can capture it on camera? So yeah, it depends on the relationship and the situation, but it has to feel natural to the story and it has to be very intentional. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for staying.